Test 1, 2.
Hi.
One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, this one again? Yeah, it's on. Thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Trustees, we are going to get started. If you can take your spot. Yeah. Seven. Start calling the names. Trustees doing a quorum check. Trustee Arts. Trustee Dawson. Trustee Didavides. Trustee Earhart. Trustee Goss.
Here.
Trustee Hassan. Trustee Hastings. Trustee King. I know a number of you are still finishing up dinner. If you can make your way here, we need to start the meeting in a minute. Let's start. We'll start, right? Yeah, we'll start. Sarah. Trustees, if trustees, we are going to start the meeting. I would like to call the meeting to order. Join online. Trustee Patel is here. Hi. Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome all of you to our December 2024 regular board meeting. If I can ask everyone who's able to please stand for the land acknowledgement and the national anthem. We acknowledge we are hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Thank you. We will now move on to approval of the agenda. Trustees, we are hoping to get to a timed item on the trustee vacancy 15.1 around 7:30. Other than that, if it's possible for me to have somebody to move and second the approval of the agenda. Trustee Williams, Trustee Arts, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much. All right. There's no Heritage Month this month, so we do not have any announcements related to that. So I'll move on to my announcements. Trustees, welcome to our final regular board meeting of 2024. I would like to start off with sharing some significant updates on our recent advocacy efforts. Following a motion at our November 6th board meeting, I wrote to Minister Dunlop to highlight the early success of our Math Achievement Action Plan, which has already led to notable improvements for grade 3 and grade 6 students in our schools that are identified for additional focus and additional support. In addition to that, de-streaming of grade 9 math has shown positive results, with roughly 56% of students meeting or exceeding the provincial standard. Thanks to the years of advocacy by community members, we now have made this important change in our system. But in order to have de-streaming continue to show positive results, we will need targeted investments to support it. Through the letter, we have requested additional funding for 2024-2025 school year to hire more math learning partners and to expand our successful strategies to more schools. Continued support is crucial as we advocate for necessary resources to sustain and build on these achievements. On November 20th, I had the opportunity to discuss the topic of education budget cuts and chronic underfunding of public education on TVO's agenda with Steve Bacon, alongside 3 other panelists from across the province. This 30 minutes conversation was an opportunity for us to continue our advocacy efforts for adequate funding that meets the unique needs of students and schools across Toronto. We cannot continue to operate under outdated funding models that fail to address the students' current and future needs, especially in a city such as Toronto. While we're on the topic of government funding, it was inspiring to see the recent federal and provincial announcement of support for student nutrition programs in Ontario. While we await further details, we know that every dollar invested in student nutrition program is a step towards better academic performance and overall well-being. As we have done in the past, we as trustees at TDSP will continue to advocate for universal and accessible student nutrition program across the city. As trustees, we'll also keep advocating for safe and inclusive learning and working environment for every student and staff member at TDSP. We continue to meet with various government and community groups to better understand and address incidents of hate and racism in all its forms. Unfortunately, yesterday's firearm incident at Silverthorne CI is a reminder to us that school safety still remains a big concern. And we have to pool all of our resources together and have our collective will to make sure our students, staff, school communities are safe. While thankfully no one was injured during this incident, the impact these incidents have on the school community is very troubling. I want to thank all the staff and the community members that pulled together yesterday to support the student and today to support the students, staff, and all those impacted. I know Trustee Dan McLean, who's the trustee for that school, also wanted to share some words at this time, so I'll pass it to him.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Yesterday's Guns Fired event at Silverthorne Collegiate was, as everyone can imagine, was challenging and hectic. It happened at the end of the school day, where some students were present, not all the students were present, which creates a challenge. We had 60 students from Humberside Collegiate were there for an unrelated event playing sports. So everyone was required to follow the lockdown procedures. The Silverthorne students did, the staff did, the Humberside students did. Everybody responded just as you would hope it would take place. I'm very grateful for Principal Mark Varvis, Vice Principal Joyce Kite, and Vice Principal Kelly Gaudette. The police were notified and they came immediately. They were on the phone making them aware. And the vice principal asked, when can we expect help? And help was already on the way. So the support from EMS and TPS was immediate and in full numbers. So we were grateful for the response to protect everybody's safety in the building. I also want to recognize Superintendent Lorraine Linton, Executive Superintendent Jim Spiropoulos, and Caring and Safe Central Principal Dale Alvey for coming and showing support. This is the third significant incident for Silverthorne Collegiate over the last year and a half. And the mental health and well-being of students and staff has been tested in a dramatic way. I was able to be in the building this morning for the staff meeting, and it was a very difficult conversation, but staff felt heard and supported. They didn't have all the answers, and there's lots of work to be done going forward, but I do want to thank Manager of Social Work, Adolph Williams, and his team for being available to support everybody when needed. All those drills we do worked exactly as it was supposed to do. And in this occasion, we were lucky that no one was hurt. But it has a profound impact. There's the world of difference between going through a drill that lasts a few minutes and going through a real life activity in more than 2.5 hours, being confined to a space that is ultimately broken when the TPS tactical unit comes through the door. These are very real, dramatic, and impactful events. So I want to thank everyone, staff, TPS, emergency services, everybody that responded so quickly to be so responsive and so supportive to student and staff. Thank you for the indulgence, Chair.
Thank you, Trustee McLean, for your work at the school as well. Last month, a few trustees met with Ambassador Deborah Lipstadt, the U.S. President's special envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism. We were joined by Vice Chair Patel, Trustees King, Laskin, Lalka Rotman, and Sri Skandaraja for a productive discussion with the ambassador. The meeting hosted by U.S. Consulate General focused on the current state of rising anti-Semitism inside and outside Toronto schools, as well as the TDSB's initiatives and challenges in relation to combating hate. Ambassador Lipstadt expressed concerns about the rise in anti-Semitism globally and locally and shared insights from international efforts to help address these issues. Thanks to all the trustees who participated and contributed to this important dialogue. My sincere appreciation to Trustee Laskin for volunteering and preparing information to share with the ambassador as well. Trustees will persist in collaborating with local, provincial, national partners to advocate and advance the anti-hate and anti-racism strategy that we have, ensuring safe and inclusive environment for all. I recently had the honor of visiting Kapapa Machkwe School to meet with Elder Dr. Duke Redbird and Superintendent Tanya Sang. During this detailed conversation with both of them, I learned quite a lot, and I thank them for their time and guidance. We discussed many items that need immediate and additional attention, focus, and the will of the board to proceed. I'll work together with the trustees here to discuss each of those items that we discussed at that meeting in the coming weeks to move them along to see some resolution and positive outcomes soon. Indigenous student leadership was also something that we discussed during my visit there. And it's exemplified here well in this boardroom through our Indigenous student trustee, Darian Westra. I want to thank Indigenous student trustee, Darian Westra, for his thoughtful approach to leadership development and succession planning, because he reached out to me and said he would like to find ways to bring other Indigenous youth leaders to the board meeting for them to become familiar of what's happening at the board. This level of leadership development and succession planning thinking is well appreciated. So this evening, he's joined by Celine Ojek from Rosedale Heights School of Arts. If you can wave, Celine. Thank you very much. Please leave a round of applause. Welcome, Celine. It's important to make these spaces, such as our boardroom, a welcoming space for all young leaders, particularly young leaders from the Indigenous communities that are represented within the Toronto District School Board. Moving on to Auditor General's report released recently. As you know, the Auditor General's office released the TDSP Safety, Financial Management, and Capital report last Tuesday. I know we all appreciate the many staff members who tirelessly worked to gather and submit information over the past 2 years. Their cooperation was crucial to the release of this report. We thank the Auditor General and her office and all her staff for their comprehensive review and recommendations. We remain committed to creating safe, inclusive, and high-quality learning environment for all. I know many of you here are concerned about the findings. I share your concerns as well. We as trustees are committed to finding ways to address the recommendations in the report in a meaningful and sustainable manner. The audit covered areas up to 2022-2023 school year. And while there's definitely more work to be done, the staff have already shared with us some of the ways in which they have already addressed and have made significant progress on a number of recommendations. For example, a plan to reduce staff sick days was included in the last year's budget process. We can also point to the capital revitalization strategy, employee interim measures, pending investigation procedure as two concrete initiatives supporting the recommendations associated with the capital planning and staff investigations. Some of the recommendations from the report come with additional costs that we are not funded for and go above and beyond provincial legislation. As a result, we will need to work closely with the Ministry of Education to determine how do we move forward on those recommendations and how do we get them implemented with funding. Having said that, I know we as trustees have more questions about the report. Trustees will have an opportunity to learn more about the review, recommendations, management response, and current progress during the Special Audit Committee meeting on Wednesday, December 18th, and during the board meeting that follows, in which that audit committee report will be coming forward to the board. I look forward to sharing additional updates in the new year. With the winter break beginning next week, I want to highlight the compassion and generosity of the Board of Trustees here. This holiday season, we came together in solidarity and support of the mutual aid efforts that takes place across TDSP at this time of the year. The Holiday Hamper program was started by TDSP social workers in 1996. These staff members identify families and youth that might be in need of support over the winter break. A big thank you to all the trustees that came together to support a holiday hamper this year, and to the TDSP social workers and school communities for their work in fostering generosity, kindness, and empathy. Especially grateful for the leadership of Trustee Sarah Earhart, who organized the holiday hamper efforts. As we bid farewell to 2024, I reflect on this transformational year that has seen some transition as well, marked with significant changes to the chair and vice chair position, having an interim director of education, shifting to a family of school model, and many more. We as trustees and senior staff have come together, pulled together as a team through all these challenges this year, and we have transitioned well over the past months. Going into 2025, we have our path clearly defined through the direction from our multi-year strategic plan. Guided by the principles of equity and commitment to truth and reconciliation, calls to action, the multi-year strategic plan will focus on our efforts over the next 4 years. This strategic plan serves as a roadmap to achieve the collective vision of TDSP students and staff, reflecting the diverse perspectives, ideas, and goals of our communities. As we look ahead to January and beyond, I can't wait to see what this Board of Trustees can accomplish for the second half of our term. You've all done incredible amount of work, both in your communities locally and collectively here in the boardroom, and that's definitely worth celebrating. So please take the time during the holidays to relax and take care of yourself. We all deserve it. To the many staff members who support us, our work, our school communities, we thank you for your professionalism, passion, and dedication. Over this winter break, I look forward to spending more quality time with my 2 sons who are in grade 5 and 8, and I look forward to exploring with them new places that we haven't been to and making memories that we will treasure for our lifetime. I hope everyone gets a chance to rest and relax with your loved ones. As you know, before you know it, we'll be back here in the boardroom doing business. So I conclude my chair's announcement with this. I conclude my chair's announcement and will now move on to the rest of the agenda. Thank you very much. Okay. Moving on to number 9, reports from trustees appointed to external organization and student trustees. So we had a timed item at 7:30, so we'll go to that timed item and then come back to the trustees' report, if that's okay with you. Is that good? So we have, the timed item was 15.1, which discusses trustee vacancy in the Toronto District School Board, Ward 11. The reason it's timed is that we have a guest externally joining us from the city clerk's office of City of Toronto to answer questions related to this item. So I would like to first pass it to the director to introduce the item.
Thank you, and through the chair, this report is coming today as a result of the vacancy in Ward 11. Trustees have two options before them in the report to fill the vacancy, one through a by-election or two through an appointment. The two options are included as recommendations 1 and 2, and trustees will choose 1 or 2. So it's not both of those recommendations, depending on where trustees land, it would be one of the two recommendations. Just upon confirmation of her election as city councillor, trustee Chernos Lynn submitted her resignation on November 6th. The Education Act provides for both of the options being presented to be used to fill the vacancy, and the processes or the process, at least for appointment, are outlined in the report. The appointment would be done through committee, and the position would be required under the Education Act to be filled by February 4th. The city clerk's office would complete the by-election, and if that is the option that is chosen, would be able to provide more information about the process and timing. From a cost perspective, the election is estimated to cost approximately $500,000 to $540,000. Our last appointment cost approximately $15,000, so staff's best estimate at this time is about $20,000. Again, staff is happy to answer any questions, and Tobias Novogrodsky is here from the city clerk's office as well, if trustees have questions. Thank you, and through the chair.
Thank you very much. We have a speakers list, trustee Pay and then trustee McLean. Trustee Pay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I want to ask, the director that is, what's the position by the senior staff on this item?
Thank you, and through the chair. Staff will support the direction of the trustees, and the trustees will decide upon which is the process or which process they would like to follow, and staff will support whichever direction is chosen. Thank you.
Okay, my second question would be, if there is funding issue for by-election? Is there funding issue?
So through the chair, the by-election is estimated to cost approximately $500,000. And so we would have an expectation to find that in this year's budget in order to be able to spend that amount of money.
Okay, my third question would be, if the funding is now issue, have the board ever taken concern about letter we're receiving from the PIAC committee, this afternoon? I just want to read loudly. Dear Chair of the Board, Trustee Shan, the Parent Involvement Advisory Committee supports parents, caregivers as partners in education. PIAC is a provincially mandated statutory advisory committee of the Toronto District School Board. The purpose of PIAC, as per Education Act Regulation 61200, is advise the board on parent caregiver engagement, support, encourage, and enhance parent engagement, supporting school councils, providing information about education system and parents, caregivers, and school councils, consult with the board on parents caregiver engagement initiative, host activities to help parents support the child learning at home and at school. And the PI's position is that in the interest of parent and caregiver engagement and to enhance accountability of the education system, an election must occur to fill the trustee vacancy in Ward 11. PIAC membership had discussed the disadvantage and advantage of election by public, including parents, caregivers, versus an appointment process by trustees supported by TDSB staff. and corporate consultants. An appointment process instead of election due to funding concern or erroneous. Trustees operating in the best interest of student and parents caregivers should see holding a democratic election as an opportunity for parents caregivers to engage during the campaign to discuss issues facing students and the families of the TDSB, and for new independent voice to step forward and to be elected by the community of Ward 11. Thank you for your time and consideration. Sincerely, PIAC membership. So through Mr. Chair, I want to ask the staff opinion on this letter.
Through the chair. So staff always appreciate the hearing from PIAC, especially as they represent our parents and caregivers across the system. We certainly do value democracy as well. And again, we will leave it up to trustees as to the process that they choose, and we will support accordingly. Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to get a clear answer, from the Madam Director that would the Madam Director support the PIAC committee's recommendation holding a by-election for Ward 11?
Trustee Pei, the PIAC recommendation is to the direct, PIAC advises the Board of Trustees, not the staff. So it is the trustees' opinion on the letter that is more relevant than staff's opinion.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to move motion for this item. Okay. I want to move motion, Mr. Chair, by adopting 15.1 option A, hosting a full-scale by-election.
Thank you, Trustee Pei. Trustee Pei is moving. So as you know, the report is in front of us with some options, and trustees are, trustees are encouraged to pick an option to move, and Trustee Pei is moving 1A for by-election, full-scale by-election. Is there a seconder? The Trustee Hastings. Okay, that's on the table right now. Do you want to wrap up your comments and then we'll get people talking on the.
Sure. Mr. Chair, I'm proud to present this motion calling for a full scope by-election for the vacancy on Ward 11 Don Valley West. School board in Ontario have been democratic since 1816. We all occupy our seats, not because we impress a committee, but because each of us won an election fair and square. We printed pamphlets, knocked on county stores, attended committee meetings, barbecues, and coffee parties. Each of us earned the support and the trust of the friends, acquaintances, neighbors, and the grassroots community groups. The fact that we are all democratically elected makes a huge difference with respect to the legitimacy of our leadership and the collective authority. As board members, we disagree between ourselves on many issues, and that's understandable and reasonable. We represent different parts of the city, and we occupy different positions on the political spectrum. The slogan, diversity, our strengths, also apply to viewpoint diversity. This afternoon, we received a letter from the PIAC committee recommending the board to advocating for a by-election at the Ward 11 Don Valley West. Tonight, we have a choice. We can choose to uphold democratic values and insist that everyone who sits as a trustee on this board draw their mandate to govern Toronto School from the people of Toronto. The choice have a cost between $500,000 to $540,000. You have served long enough with me to know that I'm a fiscal conservative and I don't believe in wasting public money on unnecessary expenditures. But the election are not unnecessary expenditures. They are about giving people a say in how their resources are spent, how their public schools are governed.
Trustee Pei, time is up, but if you want to wrap up in like a few
Okay.
seconds.
The board budget is a $3.5 billion. The cost of by-election is a 0.015% of budget. That is a small price to pay for democracy. Democracy is a priceless. Let's not put a price tag on our democracy. We need a by-election for the Ward 11 down by Levi's. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Trustee Pei. Thank you. We have a speakers list from before, and I'm assuming because the item is single item report, so I'm assuming you would be speaking on that. So I have Trustee McLean, Trustee Nunziata, Trustee Dawson, Trustee Laskin, and Trustee Lee as the next set of.
Given that Trustee Pei has just moved the motion, shouldn't the speaker list be on Trustee Pei's motion?
Yeah.
Which means speakers that's spoken on Trustee Pei's motion can still speak on the main item after the motion either passes or fails, right?
So, Trustee Lee, the whole report is about this choice. So basically, if this motion passes, then the report has been adopted. If the motion fails, then there will be reintroduction of another motion that people might be able to speak.
Just to clarify, if the motion fails, for example, if I speak on this round, if the motion fails, I can speak again.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's correct.
Thank you.
Is that a point of order, Trustee Arhar? Yeah.
Through the chair, do we need to identify a source of funds for the motion to be valid? Thank you.
I'm going to ask the staff, this is in the past, we've had similar motions for elections. I don't know if they had come with a source of funding, but I think it's important to know what the source of funding at least is. So just wanted to ask Director to comment on it.
So through the chair, these motions are the motions that we have used in the past when it has come to other vacancies that were being filled. So these are the motions that trustees would have looked at in the past. With regards to a funding source, staff has been asked about a funding source. Funding sources are certainly difficult to identify in the middle of a school year, especially when 85% of our budget is staffing.
Director, if somebody asked that question, we can answer that.
Oh, sorry, I thought that's
thank you.
the question.
It was a point of order, so not a question from Trustee Arhart. Point of order was whether it's necessary or not, so we got their response. And if we have any trustees asking more about the finances, then please, you're welcome to offer that. So, Trustee Laskin, is that a point of order or is it?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I understand it may have been a similar recommendation in the past, but according to our bylaws, it's not in order. It's in order only if a funding source is provided. Any expenditure of funds requires a funding source for the motion to be in order. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Trustee Laskin, I would like to rule that regardless of whichever option is chosen today, even if the appointment choice, that still also requires a certain amount of money and will require a funding source. So this is in front of us to make a decision on which way we would proceed. And then based on that, we would have to look at, I think the discussion may generate questions where people may be asking the director where the sources are coming from, and we can proceed with that. This is choosing one of the options that are presented by the staff recommendation. And any recommendation we choose in this will have a financial implication. Therefore, if one part is out of order, the entire report will technically be out of order because it doesn't have a financial allocation.
Okay, but Mr. Chair, if I can read you, it says, in order that it be in order, any trustee motion or staff recommendation that would require the board to expend funds has to include the following information: the projected cost of implementing the proposal, which we have been provided, the recommended source of the required funds, including any required amendments to the board's approved budget, an analysis of the financial implications prepared by staff, and a framework to explain the expected benefit and outcome of the result of the expenditure. So it actually says trustee motion or staff recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Unless it's amended to say pending funding source.
Right. So I think, so there are a few things in consideration here. We have to make a decision as to how we proceed to fill the vacancy. Regardless of whichever method we choose, there will have to be an allocation of finances. So I guess the staff recommendation, staff report here is incomplete in the sense it's proposing to do something but does not have the sources of where that fund is coming from identified. So it's incomplete in that sense. But I think we have the staff here, so we can definitely ask those questions to see what is identified, if any, by the staff as financial resources or allocation possible for it. If the trustees are not in agreement with what the director proposes, where the fund comes from, then the trustees can then choose to not support the motion, because not only the staff have proposed option, but staff here verbally, hopefully in answering questions, will propose the source. So we can look at these motions together with the context of what the staff are saying. So even though it's missing in the report, we are hoping what will be answered by the director will complement the information for us to make a decision. So if it is appropriate right now, in order for me to determine if this is in order or not, I would like to ask the director, since it's a staff report, where the funding sources would be identified for this particular expenses, both for the allocation of by-election as well as for the $20,000 or whatever that's ballpark figure that is there for the appointment process.
Thank you, and through the chair. We are at the point in the year where we are reviewing our revised budget. So we're looking at our actuals to date, grounded in October 31st enrollments. So we have a better idea of our actual funding. And we know that there are going to be some challenges associated with the current year budget. So I just wanted to preface my statement first. Again, in the middle of the year, it is always difficult to identify funding sources, especially when 85% of our budget relates to staffing. And so it would be difficult to impact staffing at this time. That being said, when staff reviewed all of our options, $500,000 equates to approximately $2 per student. We know that we have approximately $9 million of school budget carry forwards annually. And so we would be looking at reducing the carry forward by $2 per student. So that would impact schools accordingly.
So our students.
Thank you. So since it's a staff report and staff have now identified a source for the funding, we can move forward keeping the motion as valid. And so we'll go to the speakers list. Now, the speakers that were there, if you still want to speak to the motion, we can go through you. And so Trustee McLean, are you speaking to the motion? And then I'm going to read the names. If any of you want to remove yourself from this list because of the motion, just let us know. Trustee McLean, Trustee Nunziata, Trustee Dawson, Trustee Laskin, and Trustee Lee. You're all good? Okay. We'll move through them and then add new speakers. Go ahead, Trustee McLean.
Thank you, and through the chair. I'm very much opposed to the motion. It is not lost on me that I am a democratically elected trustee, as we all are. And it is the fundamental premise of the position as it was designed to support it. You know, we're a balance in the system. And we should be, all things being equal, we should be democratically elected. But all things aren't equal. The two choices that we have on the table differ by the amount of $500,000. And that's dramatic to me. I've been here 6 years. We've had deficit budgets for 6 years, and finding 500K is a tall order. I will remind everybody that each of the trustees in this chamber, when we vote, we have 4.5% of the power. There's 22 of us. That equates to 4.5% of the power. Is it not a situation in which the balance of power in smaller boards, where one or two small numbers are made up, where dramatic differences would be made in the board? We were reminded at governance training last Friday night that the Education Act requires us, not encourages us, but requires us, when we sit in here and we push the green button, that we do not represent our wards in what we believe to be the best interest of our wards. We are required by the Education Act to represent the needs of the board as a whole. The duties of the trustee aren't limited to those votes. An appointed trustee would have the ability to represent the schools in Ward 11, to serve as a conduit to support parents in their individual, when they reach out, they need help navigating the system, they'll be able to reach out and they'll have someone to be able to work with their local schools and to help them navigate the system. But in this body, we have the responsibility to deal with the whole, what happens throughout the district. And that can be served by appointing. The Education Act provides us two options, and both of those options, our duties can be met by appointing a trustee, and we save $500,000 when we do it. Okay? We've done this before. We have appointed trustees before, and they have made significant contributions to the board because they come and they become prepared and they act in the general interest of the entire district. That's what we're required to do when we rise here. And that duty can be filled by an appointment, and yet still have the ability to serve the local constituents through the work done locally in the ward. By electing a representative by Ward 11, we don't produce someone who stands and rises and represents the best interests of Ward 11 in this chamber. To do that would conflict with the Education Act and conflict with our governance responsibilities. We are to act in the general interest of the collective in here. So we can achieve both our objectives, both the duties of the trustee in the representative for Ward 11, and save $500,000. I personally don't know how we choose to spend $500,000 we don't have. We haven't had for years. We've been cutting for years. We've like $500,000. That was the adult education. That was the approximate, the adult education, the Learn for Life. Like, it's a substantial amount of money. And I would encourage my fellow trustees to reject the motion, and ultimately, when it comes back around, to select a process that appoints a director for the remainder of the term. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Trustee McLean. Trustee Nanziara.
Thank you, and through the chair. I know we have one firm telling us that it would cost $22,000. Another is telling us it would cost $50,000. And I know that if we appoint someone through a search firm, our credibility, our accountability will be drawn into question with every decision that we make moving forward. So I want everyone to just think about that. We have the public that is intensely engaged in this process. And $2 a student doesn't seem like too much of an impact in the classroom, but it really is. This is a big hassle for the TDSB to have to pay for an election, to have to pay for all the polling stations and the polling staff in Ward 11 to get everything organized and have everyone come out and vote. But democracy is priceless. And I think it's much more important that we move forward with an election. So I'm pleased to support this motion. Thank you.
Trustee Nanciata, thank you. Trustee Dawson.
Thank you. And through the chair, I have some questions for staff. How much would $500,000 in spec ed consultants get us? How many spec ed consultants could we get for that?
Through the chair, consultants, 3 to 4.
Awesome. How many school-based safety monitors could we get for $500,000?
Approximately 10.
Wonderful, thank you. What is the cost of the Learn for Life program?
Through the chair, based on the past, it's been approximately 700,000.
Thank you. How many more math learning partners could we get for $500,000?
Through the chair, approximately 3 to 4.
Wonderful, thank you. What was the cost of the summer youth programs that were canceled this past summer?
Through the chair, you stumped me on that one, but we can find out.
Okay,
Thank
thank you. I would really appreciate that. And to my colleagues, the point I'm trying to make is that $500,000 is a lot of money to us. The safety and security and well-being of our students is paramount at the TDSB. We just lost an $11 million fund for well-being of students and safety. That put us under the amount of school-based safety monitors that we actually need. We could get another 10 for $500,000. We don't have the money to do this. And I 100% support this motion if we had the money. But I do not believe that we do. And I just cannot bring myself to take away any more resources for our schools. To staff, through the chair, what does $2 per student get us? What is the impact of removing $2 per student?
Through the chair, depending on the size of the school, it could have, if the smaller schools, obviously that would be a bigger impact. It impacts the school budget. So whatever schools use their budgets for would be impacted accordingly.
Okay, so sorry, can you remind me what is the dollar amount per student, per pupil?
Through the chair, I'll ask Executive Officer Snyder, please.
Have that with me right now, but I can look it up. Our funding to school budget is somewhat based on enrollment, but it's based on other factors as well, as like music, how many music instruments they have in the school for the amount for music equipment repair. But I'll take a moment and I'll use my colleague's computer and I'll get you a per pupil amount.
Thank you. I just cannot reconcile the fact that we would need to be canceling programs. We would need to be removing resources from our schools. Our obligation is to adequately fund and support education for K to 12. And I don't believe that any amount of cuts are reasonable at this point in the year. Like I said, I would wholeheartedly support it if I felt that we had the funding, but we do not. And I encourage my colleagues to vote against this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Dawson. Trustee Laskin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. A question to staff. Did we not as a board review school budgets in the last budget process and make a determination that we weren't taking money out of school budgets?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, if I can get that question again, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, I recall during the last budget process that one of the options staff put forward for cuts was to review the money that was accumulated in school budgets. And I thought that we made a decision not to go there. Can staff confirm that, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we did not, sorry, I'll start again. The change to the process was that we made it a maximum of 25% carryover of their school budget allocation, that the schools could submit business cases for larger amounts if they had certain projects that would be reviewed centrally. And so that program's been in place for the last year.
Right, but through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, just to confirm, we chose not to reduce any of their school budgets. Is that not correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Right. So I guess my question through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, is this not revisiting a motion that we've already done to remove $2 per student from school budgets to make $500,000?
Through the chair, it is a reduction in the carry forward as opposed to reducing the annual amount. But yeah, it would be in addition or a reduction from the 25% as Executive Officer Snyder indicated.
So in other words, what we would be saying if we use that as a funding source is that even though we told you we weren't doing it, we've now decided to pay for an election based upon students and school budgets. That would be our messaging. So regardless of all the things that money could buy, which is a whole other conversation, as my colleague Trustee Dawson mentioned, we would be making it clear if we supported this that we would be paying for an election based upon students per school and their budgets. And that's something that I find unconscionable. My second point that I wanted to raise is that we talk about democracy, and someone floated the idea that decisions become illegitimate with appointed trustees. And I must say, during the tenure of the Toronto District School Board, there have been many appointments made, and no one has ever questioned a decision of the board based upon one of those trustees being appointed and not elected. As my colleague, Trustee McLean, eloquently spoke, there are 22 of us. It takes 12 to make a decision. The third point I wanted to make is since former trustee Chernislin resigned, Trustee Rajwani and I have been supporting her schools. She had 24 schools in Ward 11. Trustee Rajwani is helping with 4. I'm helping with the other 20. You may be surprised to know that I have not received one email from any of those schools asking to have an elected trustee. In fact, I've received no emails from any constituent who identified themselves as a constituent in Ward 11 asking for an election. I've received many template letters signed Concerned Citizen, and I have received 2 letters from constituents in my ward threatening me that if I don't support an election, they won't vote for me, which is always their choice. So I just wanted to add a perspective to what I've been hearing or not hearing, being involved in the schools and working with the superintendents and principals of those schools since the summer. So, you know, again, all things being equal, if I'm asking the province for $500,000 more dollars, it's not to run an election either. It would be that actually my first priority would be support for spec ed support for the early years, for the transition to fully support fully integrated classrooms. That is where we are really lacking as a system, and that's certainly going to be my number one priority in the next budget process. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Trustee Laskin. Trustee Lee?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I have a list of questions, but first I just want to get a clarification from our city colleagues. There was an option 1A and option 1B. What is the difference between them?
Through the chair, perhaps my colleague from the board wants to speak to the particular language that's used in the report. But what I can confirm is that under the Municipal Elections Act, it is the responsibility and authority of the city clerk to conduct a municipal election. And that individual has that responsibility and authority. So the direction noted here would be taken under advisement, but it can't be the case that the board directs or instructs the city clerk on how to conduct an election. And that's important to note.
Got it. Okay. My next question on the funding source to our staff team is, if this cost is incurred, it will be seen as an increase to operating expenses. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay. How are we? I know through you, Mr. Chair, Madam Director, you mentioned that we are probably going to overrun our budget this year, just like we have done last year. Now, if I recall properly, last year we had overrun our operating expenses, at least on the last report that I can recall, by $7 million. So when that happened, how did we deal with that overrun?
Through the chair, if we're looking at the revised estimates from the last period, it did increase our deficit. That being said, and I will defer to Executive Officer Snyder, but I believe that our ending fiscal position was actually better than we had anticipated.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, our fiscal position in your audit report tonight shows that we forecast to have a 15 point, I believe, $1 or $2 million deficit. We came in at about 2 million less, around $13 million deficit at the end of the day for last school year.
And how do we fund that deficit?
That was funded through the use of reserves to balance the budget.
And how much reserves do we have today?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't have the number in front of me, but I believe it's around $14 million. But again, I can look that up.
Fantastic. So given that line of discussions, if we were to identify a funding source through Mr. Chair to staff members, is it possible that we can use our original, the way that we used last year, which is probably going to be the same way that we fund our deficits this year to pay for the cost of this election or by-election?
So again, I will ask Executive Officer Snyder to confirm, but I believe that the deficit that we're anticipating in the current year in 24-25 will actually deplete our reserves completely.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that would be correct. We'll be at a depleted point of that next year, at the end of this year.
Are we depleting it to the dollar, or are we going more, or are we doing less?
At this point, through you, Mr. Chair, we are working on the revised estimates, my staff, so I can't give you until I have further details as we work through the changes in enrollment that we observed in the October report, and that's what we are working on now. I'll bring back to the FBAC committee in the new year.
If our deficit is more than the reserve, what do we do?
So through the chair, we have internally restricted reserves and then other reserves. So we actually run a deficit. So we have no reserves, and we were borrowing from other externally restricted reserves.
Can we use proceeds of disposition?
Through the chair, we need permission from the ministry to use proceeds of disposition. We are using, as part of our deficit recovery strategy, we have identified proceeds for the next 2 years. So with approval, that is always a possibility. I will say that I had been asked this to prepare for this evening, if I could reach out to the ministry, and I did. And they were not able to give a fulsome answer right now. They couldn't say yes or no,
Okay.
but they did remind us that our deficit recovery plan has not yet been approved.
Fantastic, but it is a possibility that we can. So it's not, although we have a funding source identified to use school budgets, we can first start by asking the ministry, can we uphold a democratic process using a little bit of our PODs? Is that correct?
Through the chair, we can, if directed, staff will make that request to the ministry, yes.
Okay, thank you. And back to my original question, if we went with 1B, how much money could we save off the 500,000 because it says running a less intensive election?
Through the chair, as indicated in the letter that the clerk provided, which is appended to your report, we are looking at a range of options in terms not of which voting methods would be available to electors, but in terms of the number of voting locations that would be made available on election day. And that gives you the range of 500 to 540,000. So we're looking at an approximate cost of $500,000.
All right. Okay, so 500,000 is a number. To my colleagues, I would just have to say that as someone who is elected democratically, I know for a fact that there is a cost to democracy. And it costs more for us to all sit here being elected representatives than for an internally selected board to run the TDSB by the province. But we chose to have a school board. The residents, the parents, and the students of Ward 11 deserve to have a say in who they pick to represent them. It is not about efficiency because democracy has never been the most efficient way of governance, but it is most equitable and representative and fair. When it comes to us picking someone, in the people's stead to sit on this board, I just have to remind my colleagues that this is specifically what autocracies around the world do. When we talk about autocracies, we think dictators, but that's not how most of them work. Most of them have a small committee of people who have decided that it is better, it is more efficient, it is more effective for them to pick the governors of their constituency. That's what they do. And we have students in the TDSB who has went on the street in protest in other parts of the world because their government tried to do the same thing in selecting candidates to represent them by small committees. And they went on the street to protest, they were prosecuted, and they are here because they cannot go home. What message do we send if we follow in that footstep? It's going to be $500,000. We're going to have to find a way to pay for it. As we have already demonstrated, the path is not blocked. It's a tough path, but every decision we make in this board is tough. And I just also have to say, I didn't want to mention it tonight, but I really appreciate Trustees Laskin and Rajwani stepping up to help the schools of Ward 11. But I will also say that because of my recent address change, I am a parent in Ward 11, and I have had no idea that 2 trustees have stepped up to represent me and my child in school. I had no clue. And this is what happens when you assign someone. The community loses connection with that representative. They don't have a bonding trust with that representative because they didn't pick the representative. So how can that person represent the community? I ask that my colleagues support me in asking for a by-election. There's half the term left. That's a long time. The parents of Ward 11 deserves it. Thank you.
Thank you. Point of order.
I reviewed the bylaws again,
Yeah.
and it actually says that all motions that require the board to expend funds for an initiative would be considered by the Finance, Budget and Enrollment Committee or Planning and Priorities Committee prior to consideration from the board. Are we not following that bylaw tonight?
I have a point of order, Chair.
Just let me deal with the first point of order. Trustee Laskin, I think as the Board of Trustees who are here, and almost all of us actually are here at this board, and as this decision was something that was made in the past at the board level, not coming through committee, and have identified a financial source, I think I'm comfortable ruling that we are still in order to continue. If there is an issue around identification of financial sources, then I would have been happy to say that this needs to be referred back to FPEC to find a way to bring it back. But we have identified a funding source or a source where this money would come from, and we are proceeding with it. So I'm comfortable ruling that this is still in order. So if you're welcome to challenge the chair if you wish. Thank you. Once again, trustees, just keep in mind that the motion on the screen is combined with the source that's been identified by the director. So even though we might talk about multiple different sources and options, when you're deciding on this right now, you're talking about that particular financial source that's identified. Even though it's not recorded explicitly at the report, I've given the leeway for the staff to add that through oral. So that's what's being considered, just to clarify. So I have, Trustee Lee, you're finished, right? You did? Okay. Trustee King.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I have a couple of comments, but just before that, I have a question for staff. When we received approval for use of proceeds of disposition to support and balance this year's budget, I believe that it came with some expectations from the ministry around prioritizing K-12 programs. And I'm just wondering, in your interpretation, would the use of funds to support the election be in compliance or contrary to that direction from the ministry?
Thank you, and through the chair. So just to first clarify, we have not received approval yet, technically, from the ministry to use proceeds of disposition. Because our budget.
Sorry, just to clarify, I'm referring to the proceeds that were approved and applied to this current 24-25
And that
budget.
is also what I'm referring to as part of our deficit recovery plan. We haven't received official confirmation. And that being said, the costs associated with this would be considered part of our board admin and governance. And I would say that because it fits into that, it would likely be considered as supporting K-12 in the governance section.
Thank you for that. So I will comment that I have the utmost respect for democratic processes, but we are being tasked with both identifying a qualified candidate while upholding our fiscal responsibilities as a board. I share the concerns that other trustees have expressed about the identifications of funds coming directly from school budgets and coming from an area where they'll have direct impact on classrooms and on students. And this is particularly a concern for me where we have another process where it may not be our first choice, but it does provide an opportunity for broad awareness of the opportunity, for broad application, and to be supported by an information session and that we don't get as an elected, for folks that go through the usual election process in the municipal elections, we don't even have that opportunity for that added support of an information session. So this is a very good setup, albeit not the first choice that many of us would want. Given the financial situation that we're in, I do believe that it affords an appropriate opportunity. And keep in mind that part of that process is that there are interviews that are held by a selection committee that is comprised of us, trustees that we entrust as colleagues, as a board, to make decisions for the many families in our boards every day. And I see this as a similar responsibility and opportunity that I would trust my colleagues to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee King. Trustee Williams.
Thank you, and through the chair. You know, firstly, I would just like to state, you know, if a by-election would definitely be my choice. You know, as the mover quite eloquently stated and passionately stated with regard to democracy. We're a board facing serious fiscal constraints, as has been mentioned by many of my colleagues. Before I continue, I just want to reference the letter that was cited in support of the mover for by-election, the letter from PIAC. I totally respect and understand PIAC's role, ministry mandated role in making recommendations to this board, but there's a process for that. Similar to our board's standing committees, our Parent Involvement Advisory Committee has working groups, and those working groups make recommendations to PIAC as a whole. In this circumstance, I don't believe that process was followed, and I just want to point that out, while acknowledging the importance of receiving recommendations from our Parent Involvement Advisory Committee through the proper channels. I've heard statements about saving 500,000 or 540,000. This isn't a matter of saving. This is a matter of what this director has told us would amount to a reduction of $2 per student that would impact our schools. We've been in this boardroom for the past 2 years, and those who've been in prior iterations of the board, facing year after year, deficit after deficit, looking for efficiencies, trying to balance the budget. We've heard numbers thrown around. Just the basic cost of inflation hasn't been kept pace with. Our students are behind funding-wise, just in the basis of inflation, between $800 and $1,500. In order to run this by-election, the funding source identified by staff, $2 levy, let's call it a tax, a $2 tax on the head of each student. When we have another viable option in front of us that would serve our board. So I know it's a well and hard debated decision, but we have to look at our fiscal responsibility in serving our students. Are we in the position to reduce another $2 per student, a tax on the head of each of our students, when we have another viable option? Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Williams. Trustee Lalka-Ratnam.
Thank you, through the chair. Speaking as a trustee who was first elected in a by-election 2 years into the term, I have to wholeheartedly support a by-election. We are only 2 years into the term. Democracy is one of the core Canadian values that means so much to me and to many of my constituents and many people across this whole country. To me, it's absolutely a no-brainer that democracy is priceless, especially only halfway through the term. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Patel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, Mr. Chair, before I speak, I'd like to clarify when Chair Shan was a trustee in a by-election in 2016, was there a funding source?
Through the chair, I'm unaware, but I can look back at the reports.
How can I find this answer? Because it's very important. And I do understand, we're talking about funding and asking a finance chair who knows numbers very well. I've been trustee for the last 6 years, sat on finance and budget committee for almost all the 6 years. We find the money. Yes, I do understand if the term was shorter term, like what we did last time when we elected Alim Punja, there was merely 3 months. And I understand for 3 months, spending $500,000 is a lot of money. But over here, we are talking about almost half of the term. And we're talking about a democratic process. We speak about exchanging trustees from one ward to another, but we are still in the process. How can we make sure that the voice of 23,500 voters who voted in last municipal election, which was a by-election, which was won by our chair, will not be engaged in a democratic process? How can me as a trustee decide for all those 23,500 voters, 580,000 voters who are engaged in this process? We are talking about a riding which is very much engaged, which has multiple communities. You name it, they have it there. We had a premier from that riding. We had powerful ministers from those ridings. How can we take away the representation from the riding from the local individuals? How can we make sure that the person we're going to elect as a trustees comes from the same board? Every trustee has different challenges in their ward. Yes, we say that we are here for TDSB. Yes, definitely we are here to make decisions for TDSB children's. But each ward has a unique needs. And we cannot take that right away. It's very important as a trustees, we vote for a democratic process. It's very important. Let's set a precedent that, you know what, we believe in democracy and we are all for it. As my friend Trustee Nunziata said, democracy is now free. It always costs money. And we see at the board, for a number of years, we are looking for money. We still find the money. We find money from PODs. We have to do some tweakings here and there, but we find the money. And before staff brought this report in here, you know, I know I was very much confident, and I'm still confident they will find the money. I will vote in favor of the motion, and I request all my trustee friends to vote in favor of an election. It's a democratic process. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Trustee Erhard?
Thank you, and thanks very much to my trustee colleagues. There are many very important points raised from everyone here, and I find it very heartening to know that we're all united in our support for democratic processes and the value of elected trustees. That's something that brings me a lot of heart, because that is something that has been challenged in many jurisdictions in Canada. And so I'm very relieved that we are united in that as a board. I'd be remiss if I let the discussion go by without mentioning the role of the province as our sole funder and our creator, as not just our board, but other boards. One of the things that was in our folder was provided by OBSPA, following a chair's query seeking relevant information about how trustee vacancies have been handled by boards. And we have over a dozen vacancies that have been created over the 2022 to 26 term. And the vast majority, the decision was made to appoint. And I do know we are not alone across the province and facing deficit situations due to chronic underfunding by the province. So I can't help but to think that it would be helpful to have a fund that all boards could access in the event that there are vacancies created midterm in support of democratic processes province-wide. And so I simply want to bring that out, that we are not alone in this problem. Other boards are facing the same challenge in moving to appointments because of the chronic underfunding taking place. And so I do want to that I do hope that we continue in our advocacy. I have a long list of things that I would like to ask for from the province. I know as a board, we have voted in support of a long list of things, but I would like to add this to our list, as I do believe that it is a very efficient way for a province to organize itself in support of these kinds of elections, rather than each board holding its own reserve separately, particularly when so many boards are in deficit positions and with drained reserves. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Trustee Yorhak. Trustee Rajakulasingam.
Thank you, through the chair. I think a number of important points were mentioned tonight, and I want to thank Trustee Dawson for highlighting the cost of many critical supports. A few years ago, as part of the selection committee that led to the appointment of one of my favorite trustees that I've got to work with, former trustee Alim Punja. So I do believe in the appointment process. However, I think the major difference here is the timing. At that time when we did the appointment process, there was only about 4 to 6 months left in the term. Here we have about 2 years. And as a board, I think accountability to our communities and being transparent in process is really, really important. And while appointment is listed in the Education Act, I'm continuing to think about how and when these processes are used is really critical. When we talk about students and programs and how underfunded we are, that's not because of our doing. That's a position we've been pushed into by the province. And we've been underfunded year after year, and we've seen critical programs and funding sources being canceled or discontinued. I also want to reiterate what Trustee Lee had shared. As a former student that went to schools in my own ward, I feel it's my personal responsibility to take care of students, to take care of my community and my students in my schools. And with 2 more years left in this term, I think it's a disservice to our community and public education to forego an election. I think it's really critical right now that we think about how we're using processes, especially at a time when, as a board, we've been criticized time and time again for not following process. And I think it's important how and when we use these processes are done intentionally, and ensuring that the community voice and students' voice and our school voices are centered in all those decisions. So I'll be voting in favor of a by-election.
Thank you, Trustee Rajakulasingam. Trustee Dida Viris.
Thank you, through the chair. I have some questions for staff, please. I'm still not sure I understand the answer in terms of the source. Is there a net increase in terms of spending that would be expected as a result of this approval? Are we adding expenditures to the budget?
So through the chair, we would be adding the cost of the election to the operating budget this year. So we would be adding $500,000 at the end of each year. When there is funding left over in the schools, unspent funds, we usually roll that into the next year. And so this year, what staff is suggesting is that we would roll all of it but the $500,000 into next year, and that $500,000 would then cover the cost of the election.
So just so it's clear in my head, it's a net increase?
It is well, no and yes. It's an increase in expenses. And when we have funding left over at the schools at the end of the year, we usually just reserve that amount for the year following. Because we would be reserving 500 less. So it would offset each other.
So we're not, in a sense, increasing the expenditure from this year because the expenditure is being taken away from the 25-26 budget, in a sense. Is that correct?
So through the chair, we're increasing the expenditures for sure by the $500,000. If schools spent all of their budget, then it would be a true increase of $500,000. But they don't spend all of their budget every year, and then we keep rolling money over. So we would roll $500,000 less over. That $500,000 that would have gone to the bottom line and then been reserved will now cover this cost. So we are spending $500,000 more than we would usually spend. and we'll have 500,000 less to spend next year as a result.
All right, sorry about, through chair, about geeking out on the exact nature of the expenditure. More general question in terms of how the expenditure would affect our budget. We're having a couple of reports coming back now in the winter. One of them in relation to the Learn for Life program, one of them in relation to our permits and how we permit programming. The position from staff has been that a number of changes have to be made and we're rolling back expenditures. How would this affect that conversation?
Through the chair, this wouldn't significantly impact that discussion because this is a one-time expenditure in the current year versus a structural deficit or an ongoing expenditure moving into the future. So it would reduce our reserves if we haven't identified a savings to offset it, then it would reduce our reserves by 500,000 and give us less money to offset a deficit in the future. So because the expenditure is happening this year, it doesn't impact our budgets next year.
But the $500,000 is taken from the budget that we would otherwise have for next year, or no? The $500,000 is equals to the Learn for Life budget, or no?
Yes, so through the chair, I'll give you an example. Last year, school in 23-24, schools underspent their budgets by $9 million. So we carried forward that $9 million and added it to this current year's budget. So to Trustee Alaskan's point, we didn't reduce school budgets this year. So we had their annual allocation, which is I think about $150 per, at least in the elementary panel, on the $150 per student. Plus they would receive whatever they carried forward from the previous year, their portion of the $9 million. So that $9 million will be reduced by $2 per student. So each school will receive a little bit less of the amount that they saved in the current year.
Thank you. So just a couple of statements. A little bit about my personal life. I was born in 1980, born in a dictatorship. And there was not a democratic election for the first few years of my life. I understand that people feel passionate about this. I'm not going to sit here and say that anyone feels more passionate than I do about it. That'd be a disservice to my colleagues. I've also worked at City Hall for a number of years. It's always the debate. What's the right number of months before we're comfortable saying that an appointment is okay? Because it's not about whether or not an appointment's okay. It's done all the time. It's about the number of months. And I understand that. So I had one of my colleagues say, she's approved it before, 2 years is too far. And I would say if I was at the city, that would be true because they have a different budgeting process. Being at the budget committee where we spend not days, months discussing $500,000 to try and figure out how to save the Learn for Life program or how to save this other thing, how to add a few principles so you don't have schools with 550 students without a VP. The money is real, so democracy is not free. Democracy has a cost. Family members that bore that cost. But this isn't about democracy. This is about process, and process is important. Process is where we're here in a public meeting, having a discussion in the open, where anybody can send a communications without fear of reprisal, without fear of anything, because there is no TDSB secret police that's going to come after you with a billy club. So I think we do have to make a choice. I'm uncomfortable spending $500,000 that we don't have. So my choice is to vote to have not to vote for this motion, but to vote instead to do the appointment. And I think we would benefit the conversation, even if it's not out there on the internet, and that this happens, but here amongst ourselves, to understand that we all value public education and that we all feel strongly about it. That there isn't one side that likes freedom and the other side that doesn't like freedom. That's a silly conversation that it's, I hope, beneath all of us, because we all value public education. None of us is getting paid enough to be here otherwise. We do it for other reasons. And I think that's important. Anyways, that's my 5 minutes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to pass the chair to Vice Chair Patel.
Thank you, Trustee Shen. Go ahead.
Thank you. I've struggled with this quite a bit, and I know many of you have had the same struggles. As Trustee Patel mentioned, I came to TDSB at one point through a by-election myself. I didn't choose that by-election, but I'm glad that some trustees chose and I was able to run and be elected. I do think, though, I was a city councilor for a couple of years and we made these decisions, and City of Toronto has an election body that exists within that. We may be a form of a government, but we are not the same form of government that the other levels of government are. When people send a government to run through minority government, sometimes you can talk to people and say, make it work and come back to us after a few years. And so there is always a space that is given for organizations to figure it out between the time. Not-for-profit sectors who have AGMs to elect their board of directors, if there's somebody who leaves in between, there is a process for them to bring somebody in until the next AGM comes. So the appointment process itself is a tool that is given to us by legislation. So it's not necessarily sidestepping an expectation that is given to us. Would I have preferred not to? If you pass a motion to take $10,000 from each of our pay over the next 2 years to make this happen, I will vote for it. I'll gladly vote for it because it's not the money. And I know some people it will be the money, but I'm saying it is important for us to know where the cost is coming from. It is not that we are spending money, we are taking money. We are actively taking money. A school with 500 students is going to have $1,000 less. If that school is located in an equity deserving community, that is going to impact them more than a school that might be able to fundraise $50,000. So, I come from a war zone country as well, and I fled a genocide. I understand democracy. I'm continuously, and as a city council, I've always voted for by-election myself because I know that's a bigger budget. I know there's a body that's running those elections. And if it's less than a year, 18 months, we've often opted for appointment. And that's what many of the boards across the province are doing because of the financial resources. We will be spending $550,000 to pay somebody $40,000 probably to do the job. It is a board of director position. It is different from other levels of government. While I agree that democracy needs to be protected, I think it has to be at what cost? If we had the luxury of coming back after a few meetings, I would have written a letter and we would have written a letter to the province to say, can you help us save democracy by giving us this money? It is not a money that's sitting that we are prioritizing to election. It is the money that we've already given to the students that we are taking away to run this election. So let's keep that in perspective. I do think at some point we got to figure this out. We got to probably think through what is the good period to have appointment, what is the kind of funding that we can go after if we had a reserve, if we had a bit of a thing to run these elections, because this debate is hurting many of us, as you saw from those who were speaking. It is hurting. But we also want to remind ourselves that there was some reference to what is the style of appointing small group of people. This room is elected body. This group of people is elected people. And we are in this interim period using the faith of the people who have elected us and being accountable in a way that we would be doing this work. We are not a group of appointed people who are choosing somebody appointed. So we do have the democracy in this room that is elected to be tasked with this work. Will local representation suffer? Hopefully not, because the selection process needs to be very much about, not about just about the skill set, but about the local relevance. And I hope the appointment process will take that to be a heavy part of the role, because it's not the skill set. It is how much they care about that community and how dedicated are they going to be to making things work. It is hard to gauge that, I understand. Also, let's remember, by the time this position comes into play and so on, it'll be in a year, a new election campaign would start as well. So the period is not halfway, it is slightly less than halfway, but I do think as trustees, especially having been in this role, I feel very uncomfortable taking money away from schools that they so deserve. If there's any other way to make this happen, I'll be more than happy to support by election. But at this point, I think it's prudent for us to go with the appointment process. Thank you.
Trustee Sharon, I'll pass on the chair back to you.
Thank you. No other trustees online. I'll go to Trustee Pei for closing remarks. And it's been requested for recorded vote as well, so we'll do that.
Mr. Chair, as a public trustees, our primary responsibilities is to represent the voices of our communities. When a vacant arises, such as in Don Valley West, it is not just an administrative issue. It is call to action. We must ensure that the residents of this ward have the opportunity to choose their representative through a democratic process. A by-election is not merely a procedural step. It is cornerstone of our democracy. It empowers people to elect the trustee who understand their unique concerns and aspirations. Appointments, while sometimes convenient, cannot replace the legitimacy and accountability that come with mandate from the community. Since my election, I have worked tirelessly to bring about transparency and efficiency in our board operation, from pushing for open data initiative to challenging unnecessary spending. I have always believed that our school should serve as a beacon of fairness and integrity. Supporting a by-election reflects the same principle. The people must have a voice. This is about more than filling a seat. It is about trust. Trust in our institution, trust in our governance, and the trust in each other. And the trust cannot be built when we ensure that every resident, every parent, and every student has a say in shaping their future. Around the world, millions of people fight for democracy every day. Sometimes dictators ignore the idea of democracy altogether and rule because they have an army behind them. Sometimes they pay lip service to democracy and stage fake election to give themselves the veneer of democratic legitimacy. But here in Canada, for over 150 years, we have had a real election and real democracy. This is why I came to Canada 30 years ago, not just for education, but for freedom and democracy. As this board, no one can appreciate how valuable and treasurable the democracy is to people more than me, because none of you have ever born and live in an authoritarian state who with no democracy and freedom of speech for more than 22 years. Democracy is oxygen in the air. Without it, we're all going to suffocate. Tonight is the night. Let's unite together and stand up to hold the true value of democracy by giving more than 100,000 people in Don Valley West the right to vote, the right to choose their own representative, the right to have their voice heard. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Trustee Pei. Thank you. I think we can move on to the vote. Is it recorded? It's recorded vote, so e-scribe, please.
Trustee Pei in favor.
Sorry, I'm here. I
Switch
vote in
in favor.
I vote in favor.
Trustee Gross in favor. Trustee Roger Posing, I'm in favor.
Dawson against.
Shan against.
Arts against.
Favor.
That carries. Yeah. 11-10, so that's carried. Thank you. Right, so we will move on to the next item. Number 9, we'll move back to student trustee report.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you guys have all had an amazing meeting so far. As always, we're going to start off with Student Senate. So the Student Senate is continuing their work to restructure the Student Senate in regards to the new Learning Center structure. And with this restructuring, we hope to improve the internal operations as well as better representation for all students within our board.
Sorry, just before you go, just wanted to quickly thank our city clerks, our staff who were here all this time answering the question, and through the process, Tobias Novogrodsky, thank you very much from City of Toronto Clerk's Office for joining us, and appreciate your time. And we will be in touch to figure out next steps around the by-election. Thank you. Sorry, my apologies, student trustees, and
No worries, don't worry.
Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to see you all once again. It's been a wonderful meeting so far. On the topic of Student Senate, we, based on the geographical and racial backgrounds historically of both student trustees and student Senate members, there's been a noticeable lack of Black and Indigenous students from underserved communities in board level student leadership. This is one of the major areas of focus and growth in our outreach-centered initiatives.
Thanks, Darian. Now moving on towards ongoing business. This ties into the pieces that have been moving over the last couple of months and over the summer as well. And that comes into youth unemployment and the advocacy between the Toronto Youth Cabinet, Toronto Catholic District School Board, and Toronto District School Board when it comes to advocating for 10,000 youth jobs. This is in response to over 30,000 youth filling out postcards, and that has been collected across our school board, the Toronto Catholic School Board, and the City of Toronto overall. This ties into a motion that will hopefully be able to move towards on the city level / municipal level to add those 10,000 jobs that students are advocating for all across our city. With the municipal vote set to happen later next week, the initial media post that went viral with over 75,000 views, 1,500 likes, 1,100 comments, and 1,200 shares in the span of mere days truly echoes the overall pieces that comes into that particular advocacy. And we look forward to that continuation. Darian?
Okay, sorry. So as the chair, Mr. Shan over there, has introduced my shadow, Celine, that is something that will be continued throughout our board meetings. It will be a different person every single month. So for now. We have Celine, but next month during our January board meeting, it will be someone different.
Thanks, Darian. Adding on to new business and Darian's point as well, it also ties into work within RH King and us as student trustees. We've held numerous student-based consultation meetings with members of the RH King student leadership community in regards to hearing pieces about their school break structure and advocating and taking action where needed. And that particular action will take place soon.
And last but not least, for events. So in November, the student trustees, our student senate, and various students within our board attended the student senate meeting of the Toronto Catholic District School Board. With the Toronto Youth Cabinet also in attendance, we got the chance to network with students within our board, our neighboring board, and leaders within our city.
Now, moving towards our closing remarks, as we know that the holiday season is just around us, we wanted to look into the new year to follow a lesson that was very much made prominent with Maya Angelou, who's a very, very well-known speaker and poet. And she was known for a lesson, which is when you learn, teach, when you get, give. As the student trustees moving on to the 2025 year, hope to continue to advocate for that particular proverb and the multiple ones that we come here to present to you at board. As you know, the boardroom can be a very much talkative space that has so much advocacy intertwined within it. And us as student voice really hope to be able to intertwine the student aspect into all the work that you do here as trustees. And we appreciate you taking the time to listen to us and continue within that particular advocacy. Thank you.
Thank you, student trustees, for your work and representing our board so well. We will move on to the next item. Is there any other trustees appointed to external organizations to report? I don't see any. We'll move on to Director's Leadership Report. Director Zucker.
Thank you, and through the chair, good evening, students, staff, community members, and trustees. It's hard to believe that we're at our final board meeting of 2024 and all those cliched questions, where did the time go? There aren't enough hours in the day. And of course, how many days are left till the winter break? It's been a year of many accomplishments and growth for our students. And in some cases, we are actually talking literal growth. I'm betting that for many of us, 2024 was the year where we became taller than our parents and caregivers. So I'm incredibly proud of all of our students, and especially those who have navigated a challenging year in 2024. They got back up and they tried again with the support of their family, educators, and friends, and we are always rooting for you. Of course, we would not be able to make it to the end of the year without the dedication, creativity, and compassion of TDSB staff. Thank you to our educators as well as our business and operations staff who support student learning throughout the year. And I know many of you will continue to work through the winter break in order to ensure that all of our schools, are ready for students to come back in January. Our staff are constantly innovating and adapting, and I'm delighted to share a recent recognition of staff excellence. Ben Gross and Daniel Kunanek from Don Mills Collegiate Institute have been named co-recipients of the Governor General's History Award of Excellence in Teaching for pushing boundaries to inspire students and build bridges between the past and the present. These two educators developed Tasting History, which draws from the Holocaust survivors' memorials from the Azrieli Foundation. Through this, students were able to explore food traditions of the Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jewish communities. Congratulations to Ben and Daniel. This month, I'm delighted to share some highlights from the year from our STEM and robotics teaching and learning, STEM being science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. The impact of these initiatives and other professional learning opportunities provided by the science and technology, STEM and robotics departments have been significant. Excuse me. More schools are engaging with coding and robotics. Teachers engaged in this area also report a greater understanding of the curriculum revisions and comfort with implementing hands-on learning experiences in their classroom. Just a few examples of their success. The TDSB Science and Technology Resource Center supports equitable access to STEM learning by loaning out over 3,200 STEM and science kits across TDSB schools. And as of this month, these kits include a wide range of resources, including robotics, coding, microscopes, building materials, and other essential tools for hands-on activities. The TDSB Science Department, in collaboration with the K2I Institute of the Lausanne School of Engineering, had over 50 schools participating in Bringing STEM to Life program. The Work Integrated Learning Experience Summer Program offered 64 students from 29 schools an opportunity to experience hands-on research in lab settings with a focus on encouraging girls, Indigenous students, and Black youth to pursue STEM careers. Overall, participants achieved a 100% course completion rate with an average grade of 91%. Also this year, over 18,000 students participated in TDSB's Canadian Space Resource Center programming, and the Digital Star Lab, which is a portable planetarium, engaged the same number of students through 562 space presentations, educating them about orbits and astronomical phenomena. Every year, the TDSB provides robotics subsidies to approximately 75 schools with a special focus on supporting underserved communities. This initiative promotes hands-on STEM learning, encouraging students to build robots and circuits. In total, 150 teachers participated in robotics training throughout the 23-24 school year, enhancing their coding skills and integrating robotics into science and math classrooms. I want to express my gratitude to our science and technology, STEM, and robotics departments for their work in empowering students and educators across the city to be future leaders in STEM. Finally, before trustees today, you will see the annual report for 2024. There is a postcard in your blue folders and with a QR code, a link to the first web-based annual report to align with our multi-year strategic plan, and that was launched earlier this year. As part of our efforts to demonstrate our progress, you'll see examples of initiatives, programs, and accomplishments that show how we are supporting TDSB students to belong, achieve, and thrive in revitalized learning environments. We have a lot to be proud of as Canada's largest school board, and the work we are doing to advance equity, truth, and reconciliation, and to bring our strategic priorities to life. As I close, I want to wish everyone the best for the final few weeks of December, as well as a very restful and joyful winter break and holiday season. I'm confident that 2025 is sure to bring continued growth as we continue to collaborate, innovate, and commit to ensuring that all students and families in our communities have what they need. They deserve nothing less. Thank you to the students, families, educators, staff, trustees, and our partners for everything that you do for public education in Toronto. And this concludes my leadership report for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Zucker. We will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the declaration of possible conflict of interest. Anyone wishes to declare any potential conflict of interest? Seeing or hearing none, we'll move on to number 12, matters to be decided without discussion. So trustees, this is number 13 and all of 16 except 16.18 and 16.31. So 16.18 is the final submission on 2025-2026 education funding engagement guide. That one, and 16.31, which is the multi-year strategic plan annual reporting. Those are the two items that have been pulled out of consent. Everything else is on consent agenda. So can I have a mover and a seconder to move all the items, all the rest of the items? Consent. Trustee Laskin, Trustee Nunziata, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much. Now we move on to number 14, Toronto Lands Corporation report. There is an election of a citizen director to be appointed as a chair of the Toronto Lands Corporation board. So I would like to ask the director to introduce the item.
Thank you, and through the chair, Executive Officer Ryan Glenn is online, and he'd be happy to present this motion.
Executive Officer Ryan Glenn, are you online?
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me tonight. I'm happy to present to the board of the TDSB a letter of recommendation to approve John Fillion for chair of the Toronto Lands Corporation's board for the next calendar year. We met a couple weeks ago, and John was again voted on by the TLC board to return as chair. So we are putting it forward to the TDS board for your consideration this evening. Thank you.
Trustee Laskin, moving. Second, do you have a question?
There was no vote. He was acclaimed. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, additional information. Yeah, we're just going to get a mover in a second, or just and then see if there's any. Trustee Laskin, Trustee Earhart, any questions, comments on this item? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Or e-scribe is, you want to do it e-scribe? Okay. Yeah. E-scribe is open, so please vote. Shan in favor?
In favor?
Do you need anybody else? Vote? Cool. Trustee Goss?
Trustee goes in favor.
Trustee Lorca Redmond is not in the room anymore. So please mark her absent. Done? Trustee Raja Kulasingam, Trustee Sriskandaraja?
In favor.
Okay. That was Trustee Raja Kulasingam that was in favor. Trustee Sriskandaraja, are you there? No, absent. Okay, trustees, that carries. We move on to the next item. Number 15, we already dealt with 15.1 as the timed item. So 15.2, delegation of authority regarding temporary school closures. I'll pass it to interim director to introduce the item.
Chair, I'm happy to pass this over to Associate Director Pon, please.
Good evening, trustees. In the report that's before you, it's quite self-explanatory. This is a request by staff to formalize practices that we have. So under the Education Act, Section 19, the board can close or authorize the closure of a school or a classroom because of a number of emergency situations like a fire, flood, breakdown of a heating plant, and so on. There's also some provisions under the Education Act to do the same if there is a strike that causes the safety of pupils to be endangered and so on. In practice, we have been doing this on a regular basis. This would, in essence, formalize the requirement that is under the Education Act. Other school boards have, in fact, have this done. What we are proposing that this delegation authority be given to the director, again, for temporary closures for emergency situations, and that if that authority is exercised, that the director provide information to the Board of Trustees informing of when that is exercised. The board may at any time revoke that authority at its choice. However, it's important that we have this recorded in our records so that there is compliance with the Education Act. Thank you very much. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Associate Director Pon. Any questions? Okay, seeing no question, mover and a seconder. Trustee Earhart, Trustee Lee, all those in favor? We're opening e-scribe, sorry.
Roger Gilsing, I'm in favor. Trustee Ghost in favor.
Shan in favor.
Trustee Patel in favor.
Trustee Wong is not in the room. Can mark her absent. Trustee Pei, in favor or? We good? It carried, but obvious something wrong in the display side of eScribe. So as you all know, it carried. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda. We are now moving on to the two items that were asked to be pulled out of consent agenda, 16.18, which is the final submission on 2025-2026 Education Funding Engagement Guide annual report. I'm going to ask the director to introduce the item.
Thank you. And through the chair, I'll ask Executive Officer Snyder to speak to this report, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, this is a report on the submission to Ministry of Education on their funding consultation for the 2025-26 school year. In the Ministry's Education's request to school boards and the sector, they asked for 5 areas for comments. That included core education funding, special educations, efficiencies and reductions to administrative burden, communities to schools, and student safety and well-being. The board responded to those, as well as we provide our own input on some other areas of consideration for the ministry, which included mental health supports for both students and staff, increased student support for caring and safe schools, funding for the curriculum supports and PD aligned with the ministry's education plan for student achievement, increased funding to support absenteeism and wellness programs, funding to support historical and current underfunding of statutory benefits, one-to-one device strategy, cybersecurity, enterprise costs for our software, a cessation of the moratorium on school closures, coverage for all inflationary costs for a school board, funding to support accessibility in our schools, and of course, funding to support ventilation in schools improvements. And through you, Mr. Chair, that's what was submitted. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Trustee Laskin.
Mr. Chair, and thank you to staff for articulating where the gaps are in the funding. I asked this to come off the consent agenda because I think we need to take every opportunity in a public forum to talk about education funding and to talk about if it's actually adjusted for inflation, the per pupil funding is the lowest in recent history. And I think that's a really important point we keep having to make. The province always says they're investing more in education, but it's not kept up with inflation. And according to the latest information, the per pupil funding, although it increased this year from 13,584 to 13,834, if it's really adjusted for inflation, it sits really at 11,506, or a gap of almost $750 a student. So we're expected to do more with less, and we are expected to meet community expectations, and it's impossible. It's an impossible task. And one of the reasons why I voted not to reallocate $500,000 tonight is because I know the crises that exist right now in schools and wards that I represent, and I'm sure my colleagues across the table and around the table would say the same thing. There's crises right now in mental health supports and special education supports. We have a goal of integration in our classrooms, and we do not have the supports to make that actually a reality for all kids in the class. So as I said earlier, I'm certainly going to pay attention to that in the next budget process. I know we have advocated. I know we will continue to advocate. I know that the chair hopefully will have an opportunity to speak before the provincial panel. I know that OPSPA has had the opportunity to speak before the provincial panel, but even the Auditor General report talked about the fact that TDSB is in a unique position and the funding simply does not meet the needs the way it is articulated, and asked the province to relook at the funding. Not sure that's going to make any difference, but I did not want to let this opportunity pass in a public meeting to draw the public's attention to the fact that this board and boards across the province are underfunded to meet student need. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Trustee Laskin. Anyone else to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, can I have a mover and a seconder to receive the item? Trustee Rajmani, Trustee Hastings, all those in favor? Oh, sorry. Mr. Notice here wants the words to rescribe, so we'll wait.
Trustee Ghost in favor.
Trustee Shan in favor.
Trustee Rajagul Singh, I'm in favor.
Okay, that carries. Thank you. We now move on to 16.3. Item number 1, multi-year strategic plan annual reporting. Director, I will pass it to you to introduce the item.
Thank you, and through the chair. This report was a report that talked about the reporting for our multi-year strategic plan. The plan was passed in the spring. Our annual operating plan came in October. And when we started looking at how we would report back on the annual operating plan, including all of the data that we know that we need to provide to trustees, as well as the key performance indicators that are required by the ministry, and all of the important work that we're doing to support the multi-year strategic plan, we started to look at the annual reports that were already included in the pending items list for trustees. And as we were reviewing them and considering the best way to report back to provide a transparent and accountable reporting methodology back to trustees, we looked at consolidating those annual reports and providing reports to trustees on a regular basis and on an annual basis or even biannual basis under the headings of Thrive, Achieve, Revitalize, and Belong. And so this was what was presented at PPC last week. At that time, trustees asked for us to actually go through each of the items that are annual reports in the pending items list and provide those to trustees. That is included in the blue folder. I apologize for the delay. It came during the meeting. Important to know that there are still annual reports required by regulation that will still come. All of the reports attached to the budget will still come. And if those reports that I know trustees have identified some specific reports, if they are not included on that annual report list in the pending items document, they will still be coming as part of our commitment from the motions that were brought forward by trustees. It is just those annual reports that are on that list that that staff took a lot of time to go through and to consider where those reports should be appropriately provided to trustees, whether it is through one of the annual reports or whether it is actually providing the information to trustees in another form and to the public as well. So again, happy to answer any questions from trustees and appreciate staff and all the time that was involved in ensuring that we can provide those transparent and accountable reports. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustees who wish to speak on this item? Nobody wants to speak. Nobody wishes to speak. I'll pass the chair to Trustee Patel.
Thank you, Trustee Shen. Go ahead, Trustee.
Thank you. I think, as I mentioned during the committee discussing this, it is important to know all the things that we do, how they address the multi-year strategic plan. And this is a good way to organize and synchronize instead of being siloed about some of our work and be able to get the bigger picture from reporting. So I do think this is a direction that's helpful. It's also a direction that is helpful so that all related matters come together for us to get a picture of what's happening. It helps also save time from staff who sometimes have to stay till the late night to present a piece of the pie that connects with something else a few days later, a few weeks later. Having said all that, I also want to make sure that we understand trustees are part-time positions, and many of us have a day job and current structure in which we get the reports on agenda on Friday and have to be prepared. In these mega reports, what I'm calling, having ample time for us to read, but also talk to our colleagues to understand what are some things that I'm missing because somebody else has a different lens. So be able to be prepared because our board meetings may not give us the time to connect and do those things. So I do think that there has to be that part. And then I also want to emphasize what we've talked about earlier, and Trustee Lee and Trustee Pei and others have also worked on this before, is that all this information become accessible in formats as reports that online can synchronize different connectivities, as opposed to PDF documents where tables are hidden and we're not able to find what is connected to what. So if we are really going to be synchronizing this, I should be able to connect on a particular hyperlink and be able to go into some of those related files and be able to navigate the complexities of all of these things so that we can make informed decisions. So the data transparency and the kind of accessibility, along with the kind of thematic alignment of these reports, are good. I do think that in between those times, there might be trustees looking to have a specific look into one aspect that's inevitable, that we might pass motions still to kind of look at certain things coming forward in that direction. But I do think this will help us to be better prepared as we transition into 2025 and into leadership, potential new leadership coming through. It helps us to kind of think through a way in which we can get organized for the second half of our term. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Trustee Shen. I'll pass back the chair.
Thank you. Nobody else speaking on this item? Okay, Trustee Gerhard.
Thanks very much. I had two questions, and then for items to go in that we didn't previously have listed as annual reports that I wanted to make sure were going to be reflected in the MYSP reporting. One is annual reporting on student attendance. We passed a motion by board that had not yet been incorporated into our annual reporting. Where will annual reporting on student attendance fit in the new reporting structure? Thank you.
We would likely put that data in long. We're very much aware of the motion and are looking forward to reporting on our progress and our support of students. Please know that staff are really very excited about our new way of reporting to represent data graphically with lots of information, and we'll be seeking trustee feedback on making sure that our models are supporting your needs, and we'll receive feedback along the way to have the information that you're looking for. Thank you.
Okay, so just confirming, it is going to be part of annual reporting in one of the buckets, right? Do we know which bucket?
Belong.
So sorry, belong. Thank you very much. The other one I wanted to ask about was strategic workforce reporting. I know we have an explicit KPI in that area, in the area of recruitment already in the MYSP. Are we explicitly going to include annual reporting on strategic workforce matters as part of this? Thank you.
The chair, yes, that is the plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then just in looking at the mapping from current annual reporting into what we foresee through MYSP, there's a few areas that I see that are no's that I want to bring out. One is childcare. The other is international languages summer programs, road safety in school zones, and various French reports. Just wondering for each of those what the thinking is, if there will be no annual reports in those areas. So what I read is that they're not going to be migrated into the MYSP reporting format. And they either haven't been coming to board or won't be coming to board. Childcare is one in particular that's near and dear to my heart. French programming writ large also strikes me as something that I would expect would somehow be reflected in MYSP. So hoping to hear about those areas. Childcare, French, pardon me, road safety, and international languages and summer programs. Thank you.
Thank you, and through the chair. Appreciate the question. We are certainly looking at all of the reports, not just the annual reports, and asking whether they can be embedded with an annual report, whether they need to be a standalone report. May there be other opportunities to be conveying information to trustees that are better means of communication? Trustee weekly information sessions. So again, all of that mapping will be shared with trustees, and feedback most welcome to be making sure that we are giving you the information that is required. The report specifically that you mentioned, we may be turning some of those into trustee weekly information elements. Other ones may be standalone reports for you. Thank you.
Thank you. And through the chair, it's my view for childcare and French in particular. It is my view that I would like to see annual reporting on the public record on those items. I'd be happy if there were a seconder to move to that effect, that through the MYSP that we see something reflected in the model for annual reporting on childcare and early on and French programming. If someone would be willing to second, thank you.
Trustee Williams, seconding it. Sorry.
Sorry, through the chair, I'm just hoping to comment. I believe that there are parts of these reports, and the note to them said, so French, to have 3 different French reports as part of the annual reporting, I think speaks to the strength of the committees that we have and the advocacy that we have for French programming. We commit to French program enrollment being part of our enrollment reporting. We commit to, if there is a French review, I don't think it's necessarily an annual report, but there is information that comes back. In FSL recommendations, that one hasn't happened in a while, but we do believe that French will be part of, and I think the note says there may be appropriate highlights that come as part of those multi-year strategic plans. So I think what we're looking at is possibly incorporating pieces of them into annual reports, but not necessarily having them as standalone reports, and not the entire report in its entirety coming in through those annual reports. So I think that's what the note says there, is that there will be highlights that come forward. And so again, reporting on French separately from an enrollment perspective, actually, I think does a disservice to it as a broader part of the data. And so we want to consider it as part of our enrollment reporting. And for childcare, I would say that childcare information it's good information to have through Trustee Weekly and through appropriate reporting online for different, somehow providing it online to the public is the intention. And if there are highlights, again, that need to be part of the annual reporting, then that would be the intention. So I just wanted to say that it's not that we don't believe that information is important to the public or to trustees. It was just removing them as part of annual reporting to the board and finding more appropriate places to place them is the thinking behind the very intentional places that staff have put these. So through the chair, thank you.
Trustee Earhart, do you want to still pass the motion if you would.
Yeah, I do still want a motion to find a home for them within our MYSP. I think I'm concerned, I fully understand the interest of not having too many standalone reports, but I'm hopeful that we can find a way to routinely share information on the public record in those areas as they continue to be very key areas that contribute to student well-being and success as informed by our MYSP. And so those are childcare and French programming. So in the current map that we are being asked to approve, the Appendix B, they are not explicitly reflected. I was told verbally pass forward for attendance reporting and KPI. So just I'm happy to support the map provided we have a clear mapping for those two areas that's on the public record moving forward. So the public can expect,
So do you have?
we'll know when to expect some information on those areas. Thank you.
Do you have the wording for the motion? Can you send it to Mr. Notice? And while we take the other speakers, so
Yeah.
that's okay. Does anybody want to talk on that particular motion first? That's being introduced by Trustee Hart. So we'll come to it if that's okay with people. If nobody wants to talk about that particular motion, we'll come to it after we take the speakers list. We have Trustee Laskin and Trustee Lee. Trustee Laskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I raised this at committee and I'm wondering where to find it. Board motion December 8th, 2021, that reports on the data from the Racism, Bias, and Hate portal be reported 3 times a year to the board, including the annual human rights report. I mentioned it at committee. It is again completely missing. Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, where will those reports be reported? They are board motions.
So through the chair, we hear you, and it was not marked as an annual report in the pending items list, which is where this list came from. So we will not lose that commitment. That's what I indicated, is that if there were commitments that were made through the board that are not on this list, because the list is taken specifically from the list of annual reports, then we will honor our commitment made through board motion.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, to staff. When will we see a revised list then of Appendix B? So I know that a commitment has been made and I can let my community know. And when will those next reports be coming? We are waiting a long time for that report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So thank you, and through the chair, I believe what we're hearing is that trustees would like us to look at all of the commitments that we have, not just that are included as annual reports, and map them out and bring forward some sort of work plan. And so we can commit to that and bring it forward in, I would say, January, February timeframe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, to staff.
Thank you. Trustee Lee.
That's been committed for another purpose. It's just not outlined here, but it will still happen, right? I'm thinking about the annual reporting on student interest programs and the such.
Thank you. And through the chair, staff are engaged right now in looking at all reports and all commitments. And so to be developing that larger map, our commitment is absolutely to be honoring board motions for requests for reports. I just heard interim director put a timeline for us for January and February. So yes, the CSIP reports will be coming as previously indicated. Interim Director Zucker really was looking at the pending items list and what was marked as an annual report to begin this conversation, much more to come. So the board will see all reports spanning through time. Thank you.
I just want to say I really appreciate staff's undertaking in creating something like this and even more comprehensive list that's actually easy for probably not only me to read, but also for the public to have an expectation on when these kind of things are coming. So I just want to express my sincere appreciations to staff. Just to prelude the question on trustee Earhart's motion. Just from an overall commitment perspective, how much time does it actually take collectively by staff to create one of these reports? On average, educated guess.
Thank you. And through the question, difficult question to respond to. It would be ranging from days to weeks of labor, depending upon research, calculation of time, data, and so on. So really our intention is to try and streamline, create efficiencies, provide better information to trustees, more graphic representation, to be respectful of the fact that trustees are indeed part-time members of the board who have very large commitments. And if we can be stronger communicators, we feel that we can empower you to be stronger governors and us as stronger staff. Thank you.
So just for my own benefit, so that I can understand people when I ask for stuff in the future, you're saying that it could take up to 80 hours of staff time per report. Got it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Lee. Do you have the motion for the thing? Can we put it on the screen if there's no more speakers on this item? Right. That good? Trustee Earhart and Trustee Williams? Okay. Do the staff need any clarification on the item before we vote? Just Trustee, go ahead, Associate Director Sirsko.
Yeah. If I may, and be so bold to speak to the board earnestly and honestly, and I appreciate that. I would ask for consideration to give us time to show you the mapping for reaction so that we can be intentional about what data we can be embedding in annual reports. What we are hearing is information regarding French programming and childcare early on be provided to trustees. We will be making sure as we're considering the mapping that we either embedding it in an annual report that is in existence or in many of them. What we're trying to really change our culture is to be committing to a means of communication and holding to that so that we are able to have more time to engage in intervention for student learning, for professional development for staff. So just for consideration for the board as they're considering itemizing another annual report that we may create a more efficient way to give you that same information. Thank you.
Through the chair. My perspective on what's worded there is that we're not directing staff to create a French programming report annually, but we are directing to explicitly incorporate French language programming and childcare early on somewhere in the MYSP annual reporting structure. And because that is intended to be a public structure, that if it could be explicit in what will be made public on where those areas will fit, in which reports, it could be a report covering multiple issues. That way it will allow the public to know when they will be receiving information. That's how I intended it to be, not two new reports necessarily. I would leave that to staff to determine the best way in line with the MYSP. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Earhart. I just want to be conscious about the number of times. So you're still keeping the motion for, okay.
Are you?
All right. Okay, so the motion is still on. If there's no other discussion, can we have a scribe? And trustees, just to clarify, it is being moved in principle. As you can see, the wording is still principle. So we're still waiting to see more details. on the amendment right now? Shan in favor. What do you need? Trustee Pay?
In favor?
Trustee Rajakulasingam? Trustee Ghosh?
Trustee Rajagul Singh, I'm in favor.
Trustee Ghosh? I will mark her absent, please. Yeah, that's carried. Now moving on to the amended motion now, if there's no more speakers, can we have a vote on the item as amended? We'll wait till it gets on the screen. Can I have a mover and a seconder for this? Trustee Didivadis, can I have a seconder? Trustee Williams? Oh, we don't see it. E-scribe is open. Please vote on e-scribe. Shan in favor. D. Davis, favor. This is as amended. Sorry? Trustee Rajakulasingam? Working. That's fine. You can tell us how you want to vote. Trustee Rajakulasingam? In favor. Yeah. Trustee Rajakulasingam in favor. Trustee Pay in favor. Who? It's like thing. Okay. Thank you all. That's carried. Before we call for adjournment, I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank all of our superintendents and senior staff who are here, spending your precious time with us at this boardroom. Thank you very much for joining us for dinner as well, and thanks for all the work you do on the field. Wishing you all a happy holidays. Enjoy the break, and we are going to go into private before that. So all trustees, please stay back. We have a number of private items to finish, but before that, a mover and a seconder to adjourn the. No, actually, we'll move into private and then come back because we have to. No, can I have a mover to go into private? Trustee Williams. Can I have a seconder? Trustee Patel. All those in favor to move into private? Okay. Okay. All right, we're moving into private now.
Too many.
Too many. 4.
Still private legal.